Welcome everyone to the 2021 Fall Be Ready Utah webinar. My name is Wade Mathews. I am the Be Ready Utah manager for the Utah Division of Emergency Management. Now, on behalf of our entire Be Ready Utah webinar planning team, which also is our Be Ready Utah Expo planning team, we want to welcome you to tonight's event. We are very excited to have you joining us this evening. It is the third of our Be Ready Utah webinar since we have started these following the cancellation of the last Be Ready Utah Expo in the early days of the pandemic. Some of you may have been planning to attend that expo, and unfortunately it had to be canceled. And we've done these webinars a few times since then, as a way to continue to reach out to the public and provide this valuable emergency preparedness training information. And to stay in touch with you. And it's also my pleasure to announce that tickets go on sale tomorrow for the next Be Ready Utah Expo, a live in-person expo. We are planning for February 25th and 26th at the Mountain America Expo Center. So that's just coming up right around the corner. Tickets again go on sale tomorrow. There are early bird tickets available until January, and they're only $4 a person. So we're trying to make that very reasonable and available to everybody, and while still trying to pay the bills and pay the expenses. So with that, we do have a great schedule for you today. We will begin with actually myself. I'm going to be talking about creating a culture of preparedness where we live. Basically, our family disaster plans. I'll be followed by Jeff King. And he'll be introduced by a member of our team. Jeff will be talking about water storage and treatment and conservation. And then we have a great treat for you. We've talked to 4 families around the state and about their preparedness efforts. We want to learn about how Utah families are preparing for disasters. And we'll be hearing from them. We have a video presentation, and then we'll have some question and answer available afterwards. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and begin. Let me share my screen here. And as I mentioned, I will be talking about creating a culture of preparedness. Now, what does that mean exactly? So my slides are not advancing. Let's see. There we go. All right, needed to wake it up, I guess. All right, so what does that mean, creating a culture of preparedness? In FEMA strategic plan, they have 3 basic goals. And the first one, the top of the list, is to build a culture of preparedness. Their second is ready the nation for catastrophic disasters. And the third, reduce the complexity of FEMA. And for anybody who has had to deal with FEMA, they know it's very complex. And they've had a goal to simplify their processes and procedures. But I want to focus on that first goal, the top goal, build a culture of preparedness. So in their strategic plan, it says a culture of preparedness. It's a national effort to be ready for the worst disasters at the federal, state, local, tribal, territorial, community, family, and individual levels. So who does that include? Everybody. Who does that leave out or exclude? Nobody. We're all a part of this culture of preparedness. And what is that exactly? You know, it's we have a mantra. If you've seen some of our public service announcements, our little 60-second commercials about emergency preparedness, and we have a tagline on there: "Any time is a good time to talk about emergency preparedness." You know, a culture of preparedness, we start thinking about preparedness a lot more. We start taking action towards preparedness a lot more. We eat, drink, breathe, dream preparedness. Do any of you have dreams about emergency preparedness? And then, as I said, take action towards preparedness. We're talking mentally, physically, financially, as a community, as a whole, creating this culture of preparedness, thinking, talking about emergency preparedness. Anytime is a good time to talk about emergency preparedness, but as we are talking about it, that's the point, is to encourage people to take action towards preparedness. So who is responsible for your family safety, for you and your family safety before, during, or after a disaster? You know, of course, you are. We all are responsible for our own safety, our individual and family safety. Not the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, National Guard, Red Cross, the government, your church, other organizations. Those are all great resources to help us get prepared, to help us in the response and recovery phases, obviously, but ultimately we alone are responsible, have full responsibility for our safety. So what does that mean? Knowing about and having family disaster plans, knowing the risks where we live, and then reaching out to those resources that I mentioned and get more involved and take action towards preparedness. Now, knowing the risks where we live, this is a list of some of the risks where we live here in Utah. Natural risks on the left-hand side, man-made or technological risks on the right-hand side there. Which of these presents the biggest risk for widespread disaster and damage where we live here in Utah? You can look at that list and see a lot of these happen on a regular basis. This has been a really bad year for flooding in spite of our drought. I've seen a lot of wildland fires, high winds. We've had some of those. Pandemic, locusts, frogs. I mean, just about everything. A tornado. We had a tornado touchdown in North Salt Lake on September 2nd, I think it was. We've had just about everything the last couple of years. But of course, still the biggest risk for widespread disaster and damage in Utah is the earthquake. The Wasatch Fault that runs from Idaho to Santaquin, essentially, with a potential of having a 7.5 magnitude earthquake anytime in the next 50 years. That's our biggest risk. So we have a family disaster plan. We create a family disaster plan that we think, and we hope, and we just, basically this is all hazards. It's an all hazards family disaster plan. Some of these things that I'll talk about this evening are more specific to an earthquake, but these things are, hopefully will help us get through a lot of those large scale disasters that we saw on that list of risks. Now, these are not in any particular order, but they fall under three categories of knowing things, having things, and doing things for preparedness in our family disaster plan, those three areas. Not in any particular order, but like I say, I do like to start with this one. I feel like knowing protective actions is the most important. Why? Because if we don't know how to survive the disaster, then the rest of our plans don't really matter. If we didn't survive the earthquake, the wildfire, the flood, the tornado, the whatever it might have been, then it doesn't matter if we had those plans in place and food and water, storage, etc. So knowing protective actions is critical. Having that mindset, that survival mindset, that you're going to get through this, you can survive this, you will take action quickly when a threat presents itself. When we receive a protective action order, we're going to take those actions quickly. That'll help us survive. So our primary protective action, we've heard a lot of these happen more recently over the years. The primary protective action is evacuation. If we know something dangerous is coming our way, what's the smart thing, the best thing to do? Get out of the way. We call that evacuation. We can evacuate, for flooding, wildland fires, hazardous materials leaks, incidents like that. And there are a few steps here on the screen that you might be thinking about and including in your planning for evacuation, knowing the names of the roads, be flexible in following instructions, take your disaster supply kits with you, keep your gas tank at least half full all the time. That's a preparedness rule for you right there. Don't let that needle get lower than half. Go to the gas pump and fill it up. If the power's out, they're not pumping gas. If the power is working and there's a large scale evacuation, there may be a lot of people lined up at the gas station trying to get gas, and with your at least half a tank full of gas, you can just go right on by to the evacuation area. Include access and functional needs neighbors in your evacuation plan. Maybe somebody next door that doesn't have a car, doesn't drive, elderly, hearing or seeing impaired, maybe even a single parent with children that could use an extra hand. Think about those people and include them in your plans, and include your pets. Now, one thing that we do in an evacuation situation, we kind of panic. We've only got 30 minutes to evacuate. What do we do? What do we take with us? You know, of course, we're going to take our disaster supply kits, take your family members, take your pets. But what are those other things that we might have, maybe have time to grab, depending on the situation, that are irreplaceable, that, you know, are very meaningful, that we don't want to live without? Decide now what those items are. Take a 3x5 card and make a list of 15 items or so. That's just kind of an arbitrary number. It has to be manageable. You want to prioritize it, putting the most important items at the top of the list, because you may not have time to get everything on that list depending on the evacuation order. Because again, when they tell you to leave, it's time to leave. Don't wait, don't hesitate. But we're talking about here like family heirlooms, photo albums and journals and family histories and things like that. Important documents, you know, hopefully you've put these things on a flash drive, have extra copies someplace. But collections, you know, things like that. What are important to you? Make that list, prioritize it, write down where you keep them, and then keep that card next to a container that you can carry those items in if you have to evacuate. A duffel bag, a cardboard box, a Rubbermaid container, doesn't really matter. And then kind of that takes the guesswork out of it. It takes the panic out of it. You've already decided ahead of time, what do I need to grab in an evacuation? Again, don't risk your lives, don't risk your family for these things. If you only have seconds to get out, you've just got to go. Okay. Other protective actions. Sheltering in place. And this example here is specific to hazardous materials incidents, but within the last month or two, FEMA has come out with new shelter in place guidelines for multiple risks, not just hazardous materials, but weather types of hazards, man-made types of hazards, such as active threats. They might ask you to shelter in place. But in this situation, again, as I said, for hazardous materials, the diagram there, this is for having a place to go, a safe room to go inside if something dangerous is in the air outside. A chemical release, a tanker crash, or a train rollover that's releasing dangerous chemicals into the air. Go indoors, close your doors and windows, turn off your air handling systems that it might be sucking the contaminated air into the house. Go into a pre-selected room with pre-cut plastic and duct tape, meaning you've already measured the plastic for the door, the windows, the vents, the ceiling fan, and you've written right on that plastic what it's for: door, window, vent, fan. Have a roll of duct tape with it and put that in the bottom of the closet or under the, in a cabinet, so it's ready to go if you ever have to go in that room for sheltering in place. Turn on a battery operated AM/FM radio so that you can hear when it will be safe to leave. You want to hear those instructions when it's safe to leave and air out your home, or maybe you may be asked to evacuate after leaving your shelter. And again, include access and functional needs neighbors in your sheltering in place plans. Maybe somebody next door they're in a wheelchair and they can't reach to put plastic and duct tape up over the windows, etc. Maybe you would quickly bring them over to your house and help them shelter with you. Other protective actions: stand by. Emergency, maybe your neighborhood's not affected by the emergency, but they can grow, they can escalate, wildfires can spread, floods can rise, dangerous chemicals can spread through the air. So listen to the emergency alert system, pay attention to the warning systems, and follow the instructions that you might receive. Clothing fire. So this one I have included here next because it has a little phrase that we learned when we were younger to help us learn and help us remember what the protective action is for clothing fire. If we ever catch on fire, stop, drop, and roll. We all know that one. Roll on the ground, lay down on the ground and roll until you can put that fire out. And we've created a lot of other little phrases similar to this one to help us remember some of these other protective actions, such as for flooding: turn around, don't drown. Go to higher ground. Don't try to cross, that fast-moving stream or river, whether you're on foot or in a car. 12 inches of fast moving water can knock a person off their feet. 18 inches of fast moving water can float a car, an SUV. So turn around, don't drown. We've seen what happens when people try to do that, unfortunate cases, or even people on our YouTube videos watching cars floating down river, with somebody on top waiting to be rescued. So turn around, don't drown. Lightning. When thunder roars, go indoors. Now, lightning actually causes the most deaths in Utah, believe it or not, from natural hazards that we saw on that earlier list. But how do you survive a lightning storm? When thunder roars, go indoors. If you can get inside, away from that threat, that's the best thing. If you're outside and you don't have any buildings, maybe you're hiking in the mountains up on a peak someplace, obviously stay away from tall trees. Curl up in a little ball and just kind of crouch down on the balls of your feet. Be as short as possible and have as little bit of contact with the ground as possible. And that's basically protective action for lightning if you're outdoors and can't go indoors. Pandemic, we've all lived this for 18 months or more now. And I just used to say social isolation is the protective action, but we've seen it's a lot more involved than just staying away from people. It's having good hygiene and washing our hands, social distancing, staying that 6 feet apart, or quarantine and isolation, just staying home if you're sick, or if you don't even want to be exposed to the virus that's maybe rampant out in the neighborhood, out in the community. Social isolation. So we all are very familiar with that one. For a tornado, sheltering in a low place, getting in a basement, in a depression in the ground, away from open areas, away from things that might be blown over, trees and fences and power lines and things like that. A structure fire, get low and go. There's another little phrase for us there. You remember we all were taught, get under the smoke, you crawl out of a structure fire, a home or a building. That is the get low, and the go is to get out, like put you below the smoke so you can breathe long enough to be able to get out and escape the fire. And an active shooter situation. Run, hide, fight is one of the phrases. There's several phrases, but this is the one I think is most common. And this is not in any particular order. It depends on the situation at hand. Maybe you're faced with a gunman coming through the door immediately. You don't have time to run or hide. You go straight to fight. You have to just attack, yell, scream, throw things, fight. If you're further away from the situation and you have a safe exit, another way out of the danger area, then run is a great option. If you don't have any other exits, hide is going to be the best thing to do. Turn off the lights, close and lock the doors, barricade, move furniture, silence your phones, and try to be quiet and cause as little attention as possible. And then lastly, the big one for us, as I mentioned, the biggest risk for natural disaster, our earthquake, drop, cover, and hold on. I hope you've heard this one frequently over the years. And it means several things here, but here's a diagram. Basically, you get down on the floor, cover your head and neck with your arms and hands, and crawl to some cover. Get underneath a desk, a table, a chair, hold on till the shaking stops. Because that furniture might be sliding around across the floor, depending on the floor covering, depending on how violent the earthquake is shaking. So you hold on to the legs of the desk, the table, the chair. If you're in a wheelchair, unable to get down on the floor, as you can see in that diagram, lock your wheels and just cover your head and neck with your arms or hands or purse or something that you might be holding in your lap. Same thing with a walker. Now, what does this mean if, well, let me say, first of all, there's something else to remember along with this protective action of drop, cover, and hold on. If you're inside a building, stay inside. If you're outside, stay outside. Don't run into or out of a building during an earthquake. When bricks and facades, glass, chimneys, porches, those types of things might be falling off buildings, you don't want to be running into or out of a building at that time. Just drop, cover, and hold on wherever you are. If you're outside, try to get away from tall buildings, try to stay away from trees, move away from trees and power lines and fences. If you're driving, try to pull over as soon as you can safely do so. Try not to stop underneath, again, trees, power lines, tall buildings, or try not to stop on bridges or under overpasses, but just stay in the car. The best thing to do. If you're in bed, and we were all, I think a lot of us were in bed, I should say, early morning, March 18th last year for the Magna earthquake. The proper thing to do was to stay in your bed and just to pull your pillow over your head and protect your face and your neck, your head from falling objects, from flying debris, from broken glass. Things might be coming off shelves or off walls, things like that, off ceilings. So you just stay in your bed. That you would not want to get under a bed, and tell your kids don't get under a bed. Drop, cover, and hold on does not apply to getting under the bed. It also doesn't apply, as you can tell by the phraseology, for doorways. We don't teach people to get into doorways anymore. It's something that's from the past for various reasons, construction reasons, safety reasons. We don't tell people to get into door frames anymore. All right, so that's a lot of different protective actions for a lot of different threats that we face. But as I said, we've got to learn how to survive the disasters in the first place. And knowing these protective actions, practicing these protective actions, teaching these protective actions to all of your family members, your loved ones, neighbors, and friends will help increase everyone's chances of surviving any of these major disasters that we may face. Now, for the rest of our family disaster plan, again, as I mentioned, knowing things, having things, doing things. Here's a doing thing example for family disaster planning. Conducting a home hazard hunt, specifically for earthquakes, looking for things that we can do around our home to make it safer in case of an earthquake. What's the first thing we want to check? Our water heater. Is it fastened to the wall using water heater fastening kits? You can get at hardware stores. Make sure they're fastened, that metal banding is screwed right into the studs in the wall or the concrete, not just into the sheetrock. And then have flexible gas line attached to any of your gas appliances along with your water heater, so that if the shaking is violent, if appliances do move, hopefully that gas line will flex and move with it instead of breaking and causing a natural gas leak in your home or propane leak in your home, depending on what your situation is. And then you have to evacuate. You've got that leak. Other things to do: move heavy objects from high shelves down to low shelves. You can use museum putty, double-sided tape, sticky paper, contact paper on shelves to kind of keep things from moving and shifting. Using child-proof locks in kitchen cabinets keep the cabinet doors from opening and all the canned goods and glass and dishes from flying out of the cupboards in the kitchen. But again, moving heavy objects from high shelves to low shelves is probably one of the easiest things to do in those situations. Using L brackets or the nylon straps to fasten tall furniture to the walls, like your bookcases, curio cabinets, china cupboards, entertainment centers. You want to fasten those to the wall with L brackets into the studs in the wall, again, not just into the sheetrock. You can use decorative safety chain to make sure the chandeliers and the ceiling fans and those types of things are securely fastened into the ceiling. And if you really want to get into it, especially if you're in an unreinforced masonry home, you would probably want to get a contractor to come and see what it would take to reinforce, retrofit your home if it's unreinforced masonry. Okay, again, moving on for our family disaster plan, having disaster supply kits assembled. And we used to call these 72-hour kits, meaning they were for a minimum, and this still applies, a minimum of a 3-day supply of food and water. But the more you can do, the better. If you've got a kit that you can put in 5-day supply of food and water, that's recommended. After Hurricane Katrina in 2005, FEMA said have a minimum of 5-day supply of food and water in your disaster supply kit. Here's a few tips to think about for your disaster supply kits. One for each member of the family, checking them for expired or broken or old items a couple times a year. Special documents, include those in your kit. But one thing that I want to emphasize is personalize your kit. There are great disaster supply kit lists everywhere. We've got one on our website along with lots of important good brochures for emergency preparedness. One for disaster supply kit, one for special documents listed there. American Red Cross, ready.gov. USU Extension, Disaster Discovery Center. They've all got great disaster supply kit lists. But whatever list you use, or if you even go buy a ready-made kit at the store, remember to personalize that kit. If there's something that you need to be happy, healthy, and comfortable, put some of it in your kit. Maybe it's your just favorite chewing gum, or your favorite lip gloss, or your favorite eyeliner, or a book to read, or whatever. You know, personalize your kit. And everybody in the family should do the same thing. Of course, you probably should have items in your kit from each of these 12 areas of preparedness. And I'm not going to go over each one of these areas. They're listed there on your screen. Again, our disaster supply kit brochure on the bereadyutah.gov, or I should say now, beready.utah.gov website, which we just unveiled our new website this week. That disaster supply kit brochure is broken down into the 12 areas of emergency preparedness. So it already helps you kind of think about it in that way. Okay, water and food is an important part of our family disaster planning, besides what we put in our disaster supply kits. We know we can't live without water for more than a few days. And if we've just got a few days supply of water in our disaster supply kits, that may not be enough. Have extra water stored at home. Part of our year's supply, we used to call it our emergency storage, food and water storage. Have more water. And there's the water storage rule right there. 1 gallon per person per day is recommended. Actually, 2 gallons per person per day for elderly and for children. If you think about how much water we go through on a daily basis, compare that to 1 gallon, that's not very much. We're going to go through that gallon very quickly, and that's going to be for drinking and cooking, cleaning, taking your medications. So you've got to use that gallon of water per day sparingly. But what I do with that rule is I add up all the water I have stored in my house. On my blue 33 or 55 gallon barrels, my white 5 gallon containers, my 1 gallon water jugs, the water in my water heater, that's potable and safe to drink. My cases of bottled water. I add all those up, divide that by the number of people in my family, and that will tell me the number of days I can expect that water supply to last if I'm not able to get any other source of water. So that should be a minimum of 14 days. We should at least have 14-day supply, 2-week supply of extra food and water in our homes to get us through that early stages of a disaster response. USU Extension Service did a study in 2005 that determined if your water was treated and safe to drink, when you put it into those containers, you don't need to rotate it. It's already killed anything dangerous that's harmful in there. But if you do question the purity of your water, you don't know how long it was stored or where it came from, or it may have been compromised, boil that water at a rumbling boil for 3 minutes to kill anything in there that will be harmful to us. Let it cool, and then it should be safe to drink again. Having water filters handy is a great idea as well. We're gonna learn more about water treatment and storage coming up in the next session. I'll leave it at that right there. But again, food storage. Besides that 3 to 5 day supply of food in your disaster supply kit, have long-term food storage at your home. And this can be broken up into 3 different areas as well. Of the short term, the wet cans, the cans of chili and soup and stew, or the cans of beans and corn, even canned meats. We get a lot of canned chicken from the big box membership stores. Canned chicken and canned beef, tuna fish. Those are the wet cans that that stuff that we're using on a regular basis. We rotate that very quickly through our food storage. Then a little bit longer term, we might be thinking about dehydrated and freeze-dried canned foods, those number 10 cans, or Mylar vacuum-packed, vacuum-sealed bags of dehydrated and freeze-dried food. 25-year shelf life on a lot of those types of foods. And then even longer term, I kind of jokingly talking about the 4,000-year food storage, because wheat was found in Egyptian pyramids from 4,000 years ago that was still edible, still safe to eat. So have, wheat and rice and beans and sugar and salt and those long-term things to store. So food and water storage, very important part of our family disaster planning. Moving on, considering communications. Will the phones be working? We don't know. There's no guarantees, but we'll still have an out-of-state telephone contact. A relative or close friend, somebody that everybody in the family knows who they are and how to contact them. And then in a disaster, if we're separated, when that disaster hits, we can all check in with them. Yeah, your husband just called, he's leaving work, he's going to meet you at your meeting place. Yeah, your wife just called, she's picking up the kids, she's meeting you at your meeting place. What does this give us? Peace of mind, knowing that we can be reunited with our loved ones again. In my opinion, if I can be reunited with my family, my loved ones, that's half the battle. We can get through this. We can survive if we can be reunited with our loved ones. And that reciprocate. That out-of-state telephone contact also needs an out-of-state telephone contact. And we're talking about somebody that's long distance or out of state because they're away from the danger area. They're probably not impacted by earthquake damage, power outages and interrupted water or sewer, things like that. Transportation, there's no food maybe no food in the stores. They're not worrying about all that. They can just sit by the phone and relay information for you. But they need one where they live as well, and you could offer to be theirs. And just on a side note, have a old-fashioned plug-in analog phone. If the power's out, the newfangled, they're kind of old-fashioned still these days. The cordless phones won't work in a power outage. And then texting is most reliable. If cell phones and cell towers are working, texting will be the most reliable form of communication in a disaster. It takes the smallest amount of bandwidth and has the greatest chance of getting through to your intended recipient. Also part of our communications plan, it doesn't sound like a communication plan, but our meeting places. And maybe we can't communicate by phone or radio or out-of-state contact. We're going to have meeting places, 2 of them. The first one is outside of your home. In case of a house fire, a gas leak, an earthquake, everybody goes outside after the shaking stops, by the way. Again, don't run out of a building during the shaking. But you go outside your meeting place, whether it's the tree in the front yard, the neighbor's porch, the street light, stop sign on the corner. It doesn't matter as long as everybody in the family knows where it is and you can get to it quickly and easily. Okay, and then you take accountability. You count heads, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we're all here. Thank goodness. Anybody hurt? Anybody need first aid? All right, let's check the house before we go back inside. And then the second one should be outside of your neighborhood. In case of an evacuation, roadblocks, large-scale disasters hit, and we're not at home at the time. Maybe we can't get back home. Have another place to meet. And again, you choose this as a family. It could be grandma's house across town, or your favorite store, or the church, or the school. A lot of communities are having people go to the schools for a meeting place for information, a place where maybe more supplies might be brought eventually. So that school could be your meeting place outside of your neighborhood. But doesn't matter where it is. Everybody should know where and how to get there, where it is and how to get there in your family. Okay, write those down. So we've got. We sent out a brochure in our email reminder for the webinar today. Hopefully you saw that email and you had a chance to download that family communication plan, that communication plan form. It's just 5 cards. The first one is an example of how to fill it out. And there's 5 cards. You fill them out the same way, one for each member of your family. Put that in your purse, your backpack, your wallet, your glove box, whatever. And on there, it has a place for your out-of-state telephone contact. Write that down. Talk about that with your family. Write that down. Write down your meeting place outside your home. Write down your meeting place outside your neighborhood. On the back, there's a place to write down other emergency phone numbers for police, fire, the doctor, other family members. So take a minute to do that tonight, maybe during one of the breaks, or at the conclusion of this. We want you to take some action today. Take some action right now towards preparedness, and that's a great place to start. If you haven't already identified your out-of-state telephone out-of-state telephone person or your meeting places, that's a great place to start. Simple thing. It's low cost or no cost. This is National Preparedness Month, and week 3 for National Preparedness Month is low cost, no cost preparedness. And there's no cost to asking for an out-of-state telephone contact and identifying your 2 meeting places. So there you go. You've fulfilled a week 3 goal for National Preparedness Month. Okay, moving on. Knowing how are you going to be notified of an emergency or a disaster coming your way is going to be important. Knowing and being notified of where triage and treatment centers may be located, where shelters may be located, where decontamination locations will be, where FEMA's points of distribution will be, where they may be shipping in bread and milk and cheese and ice and water. You know, it's going to be important to know where all those things are being conducted. And our warning systems may be ways that we would learn those things, and where we would hear about protective actions if we have enough notice that something dangerous is coming our way. Sirens are one of the first. Some communities have sirens located around the community. Some of them have some just on top of fire stations, things like that. Emergency alert system. I mentioned this as part of our protective action to stand by, but just knowing, you know, the emergency alert system on TV and radio. The primary station in Utah is KSL 1160 AM, 102.7 FM, or channel 5. And then it spreads out from there to all the other TV and radio stations. And who uses this the most? The National Weather Service. We see this used a lot with weather watches and weather warnings. So pay attention when you hear that beeping sound, and it's not just a time to run to the bathroom or go get a snack. Listen and see what the emergency message is on the EAS. Cell phones or wireless emergency alerts. It's a fairly new warning system, maybe the last 5 or 6 years or so, and we're continuing to improve it. And it's already built into your phone. It uses your cell phone towers to locate where you are, and if you're in a dangerous area or potentially dangerous area, and you'll get a warning message over your phone, unless you've gone in and opted out. Now, I would not encourage you to do that. I would encourage you to leave it opted in. Why would you not want that emergency warning at the palm of your hands, in your pocket, in your purse, whatever, wherever you keep your phone, and receive those emergency messages? We see this being used a lot for Amber Alerts here in Utah. Highway message boards. Not only will they tell you traffic problems, but they can tell you about road closures, or they could direct you to a shelter or a points of distribution. Tone alert radios. These are weather radios. You may have heard of these. You can buy them at basic electronic stores. And the National Weather Service normally puts 24-hour a day, 7-day-a-week weather forecasts. But in an emergency, they can set those off. They'll set off a little tone, and then you'd come and push the button that turns the speaker on, and you would receive that emergency message for the area where that radio is located. Route alerting. And this is basically just police and fire and other emergency personnel going up and down a street, some city blocks with their PA systems announcing an emergency or protective action. You have 30 minutes to evacuate and evacuate in 30 minutes. Again, listen to, pay attention, heed the warnings, heed the messages you would receive over the warning systems. Telephone calling trees, whether you're in a group, an organization, a club, a church, work, you may have telephone calling trees for notifying and taking accountability for members. And then lastly, social media may also be considered part of a warning system. Information is always constant there. It's always coming out. It's quick, and in many cases, hopefully self-correcting. You know, as there's misinformation and rumors there many times, but people that are tuned into the official sources on social media, they can recognize the errors, the mistakes, the misinformation, and help to correct those rather than perpetuate misinformation. So those are the basic warning systems you might have. And there's different names for them around different communities. If you've got warning systems in your community that are encouraging you and asking you to sign up, I would say to do that. Sign up for Code Red or Reverse 911 or whatever some of these other different systems you may have in your neighborhoods, in your cities. Sign up for those warning systems. Again, that's low cost or no cost emergency preparedness to do that. All right, we know power outages will happen in earthquakes and in many disasters. They happen in windstorms, they happen in winter storms and thunderstorms. We can get the power out. You know, most of the time it's for short term. But what would you do if it was a long-term power outage situation in an earthquake? It could be weeks, it could be months of power outage. Of course, you want to check the breakers first, report the outage. In a large-scale situation, that probably won't be necessary. But in smaller emergencies, you might want to just report that. Turn off your electrical equipment so when the power does come back on, it won't surge and cause damage to your electrical equipment. And then maybe most importantly on this list right here, if you have somebody that's on a life support medical type of equipment, have a backup plan in place. Generator, solar power, coolers with ice, whatever that you might need for insulin, for example, have a backup plan in place for the life-saving systems that require power. Oxygen generators and CPAP machines. And like I say, you know, if you've got insulin in the family that needs to be refrigerated, have a plan in place for power outages. And all that information comes right from Rocky Mountain Power's Being Storm Ready brochure that you see there. But other things, you know, just inconveniences, the lights are out. What do we do at night? The lights are out. We're used to having just flipping the switch and the light comes on, just like we're used to turning the faucet and the water comes out. Those things may not be happening. But in a lighting situation, flashlights, solar lights, the decorative yard lights that you have along the sidewalk, you can leave them out during the day. They charge up and bring them in. There's light right there. Glow sticks. And then having extra batteries for your flashlights, for your battery-powered lanterns and things like that. Solar lights that are shown there may have charging capabilities on them as well. Power outage light and heat, again, wintertime, you know, what are we going to have to stay warm? If you don't have an alternate heat source in the house, all we have is a furnace that requires electricity, requires natural gas. If natural gas may be out as well, have plans in place for heat. Extra blankets, dress in layers. Set up a dome tent. You know, you don't have to drive stakes in the ground on those dome tents that have the spring bars in them. Set that up in the living room. Bring everybody in the family inside the tent and conserve that body heat. Gives us an extra layer of insulation, if you will, along with our blankets and sleeping bags and stuff. And have that inside the house. That gives us an extra layer of heat and insulation and helps conserve and share body heat. And then cell phones, you know, it's our primary form of method of communication anymore. And they only hold a charge for a day or two. And again, if the power is out for long term, solar powered charging systems, you know, having extra batteries, a lot of times they have portable batteries that you can carry around for short term. And then ways to charge those up using solar or generators or other things like that. For power outage, food and water, bottled water, something, you know, we don't think about. If the power's out, pumps are not pumping water out of the ground into storage tanks. It happened where I lived one time, and the power had been out all day long. People were using water. It was in the summertime, still watering, still, you know, playing in the water in the pools and so on. And what they didn't realize is they were draining the water out of the tanks and we were losing fire suppression capabilities. And it was getting quite critical, and our emergency management, our fire departments, our officials decided we needed to warn the public, stop using the water. Even though it was just a power outage, water was still on, water was still safe to drink. We needed to stop using it. So we warned the people, they stopped using water, and we were able to conserve our firefighting capabilities and keep some water in the tanks there. But bottled water, you know, again, your water storage that we talked about earlier. Ready to eat food, we're not going to have a stove, we're not going to have a microwave. You know, if you camp a lot, you have those alternate cooking methods that you could use in a situation like this. Otherwise, ready to eat foods, manual can openers, keeping the fridge closed. Obviously, we'll keep the cold air in there. and for 2 to 3 hours, it will keep that food safe enough to drink. And in a freezer, keeping it closed at least food will last 2 to 3 days. So 2 to 3 hours for the fridge, 2 to 3 days for the freezer. Avoid candles for power outage safety and starting fires. Only use kerosene propane heaters with proper ventilation, and only run generators outside. Okay, plugging appliances directly into the generator. Don't exceed the load rating. There we go. All right, moving on. Sanitation. Again, we have a brochure just about sanitation on our website, beready.utah.gov. But before I go to the next slide to talk more about it, I just pulled this one up here. This picture on this title slide is an example of what can you do for sanitation in a disaster situation. Maybe the water's not flowing. Maybe the water is flowing, but we don't know what's happening to the sewer system. So be sure to find out if the sewer system is compromised or if it's still functioning before you start using the facilities or flushing the toilet. You may be filling the neighbor's basement up with raw sewage and don't know it. So otherwise, once that last water is removed from the toilet bowl, you can line the toilet bowl with a plastic garbage can and still use the facility, still have the privacy, the toilet seat there. It's best to separate solids from liquid. So using number 1 here and number 2 there, it's easier to dispose of them separately. You can use that toilet seat, that plastic can, for several uses, having some kitty litter and layering that, helping control odor and things like that. And you can build your own porta potty there using a 5-gallon bucket. You can go buy a toilet seat lid at a hardware store or emergency stores and have inside that bucket extra garbage can liners, a bottle of kitty litter for layering, Lysol, hand sanitizer, wet wipes, toilet paper, of course, and have your own porta potties that you can set up any place where you might need to do that. But as part of sanitation, don't forget the cleanliness. Don't forget the hand washing station. We want to prevent the disaster after the disaster, which is disease. In most cases, it's disease. We're not washing our hands. We're not cooking food well enough. We've got lots of sick people, or maybe, unfortunately, dead bodies that haven't been properly taken care of. So we want to be careful on making sure you're washing your hands frequently, using hand sanitizer, and drinking clean water. Quick pop quiz. I'm almost out of time here, but true or false? Always turn your natural gas off after an earthquake. And I'll just tell you right away, unless you're putting some answers in the chats there on our YouTube channel where you're watching this, I can't see that, but maybe some of our moderators are watching that. You can see put your answers in there. But the answer to this pop quiz is false. And the reason being is because it says always there. You only shut your gas off if you suspect a leak. You smell it, hear it, or see it, or you can see a broken gas line, or if your home is off its foundations. We still want natural gas. We still want hot water. We still want a stove, a gas stove, a fireplace, gas fireplace, if those things are still functioning. So you shouldn't shut those off unless you suspect a leak. Because if we shut the gas off, we should have a professional come and turn it back on. And if we all turn the natural gas off after an earthquake, how long will it take the professionals to come and turn the gas back on? But if you do have to shut it off, know that there's that diagram on the left there. The one on the left, the slot valve, you can see that the valve is horizontal across the gas line, like a dam across the stream. Then you know that the gas is turned off. And usually those two holes are lined up together that the gas company would use to put a padlock on the gas line in case we haven't paid our gas bill. The one on the right, you can see that slot valve is parallel with the gas line, and the gas is flowing through there. It's not a dam perpendicular, it's parallel. Know how to use a fire extinguisher, have one handy. That's part of our plans as well. You want to pass the fire test, pull the pin, aim the nozzle, squeeze the trigger, and sweep back and forth at the base of the fire. Good skill to have. And then lastly, have a plan for your pets, including food and water, identifying boarding locations, because pets aren't allowed in American Red Cross human shelters, but we realize for many people, pets are family, and if they can't take their pets, they're not going to leave, they're not going to evacuate. So they're starting to, in large situations, set up pet shelters next to human shelters so that you may have a place to leave your pet if you have to go into a human shelter. Otherwise, you can use, if you've got a neighborhood veterinarian or a friend across town or relatives, and then have a leash where you can leave that pet. I mean, have a leash or cage. Of course, if you've got neighbors or friends or relatives, I should say family or friends outside of the evacuated area, it's most likely where you will stay in an evacuation situation too, rather than a shelter. But have a leash and a cage for your pets, and make sure vaccinations and licenses are up to date for your pets. Now, I've talked about a lot of things tonight. Practice these things. Hold your fire drills and your evacuation drills. Go through your disaster supply kits. Take some action towards preparedness. Take this one piece at a time, though, because I know, it can be overwhelming. If you take it one piece at a time, a little bit today, a little bit tomorrow, a little bit next week, pretty soon you'll have your family disaster plan in place. Because in a disaster, we don't rise to the occasion, we sink to our level of preparedness. And how low do we want to sink? In the Hurricane Katrina 2005, a lot of people that chose not to evacuate or couldn't evacuate for various reasons. Those that survived ended up having to go to the Superdome, and they didn't have any extra clothing, they didn't have a bottle of water, any food, and it was horrible conditions there. It was not your typical American Red Cross shelter, which is clean and safe and healthy. But we don't want to sink to that level. So raise your level of preparedness. So are you ready? All right. I've probably used up all my time for questions, and if our moderators are there, if any of you, let's see, maybe I should open up the chat window really quick here. But I believe your questions are being answered throughout the presentation. So with that, then, we have about 5 minutes. We can take a quick break here. But again, I encourage you to download that communication plan that I sent to you in your email, reminding you about the webinar today, and start filling that out. We've got coming up next, again, a great presentation on in-depth water storage, treatment, and conservation. Now, in a side note, again, thank you for joining us. You may be one of, we had nearly 900 people register for our webinar tonight. Probably not all 900 are here, but we appreciate you being here. And again, a reminder, tomorrow, tickets go on sale for the Be Ready Utah Expo in 2022, for our 2022 Be Ready Utah Expo. So with that, I want to thank Brian. He's behind the scenes. He's running all of our technical equipment, the technology behind this webinar. And maybe, Brian, with that, if you want to, I'll stop sharing my screen. There we go. There's my contact information, I guess, for any of you that are interested in more information. But otherwise, stop sharing my screen.
All right. So he turns to the other guy and says, "Let's order the chicken."
I don't get it.
The chicken.
Sorry, no.
All right. Well, anyway, I wanted to show you my gas wrench. I got one of these so I could turn off the gas to the house in case there's a leak.
Whoa, where do you get one of these?
You can get it from any hardware store. They just say keep it close to the meter for easy and quick access, but don't actually hang it on the meter.
I should do that.
And there you go. Anytime is a good time to talk about emergency preparedness. Talk about it, share your ideas. Somebody else saying, hey, I've got my water heater fastened to the wall, I should do that. And they'll go fasten their water heater to the wall. hey, I've got a gas wrench, I keep here close to the gas meter, and they see that, hey, I should go do that. And then they'll go get a gas meter or a gas wrench and put it by the gas meter. So share, prepare. Anytime's a good time to talk about emergency preparedness.
I cannot take this social distancing anymore. It's driving me crazy.
How are you holding up, my friend?
Tell the truth, I'm dying of monotony.
You know, in our house, we have been practicing our family emergency plans. No, really, it's a great time to do it. I mean, we're all home, right? And so we've been dipping into our food storage and we've been practicing new recipes, and we've even found a few we like. And I've learned to make bread. It makes our house smell so good, and I learned to make it from scratch.
Huh. I should do that.
All right, yeah, we are just about a minute away from our next session here at the 2021 Fall Be Ready Utah webinar. Again, thank you all for joining us, and want to thank Brian Stinson and team, one of the actors there with some other fellow actors, Jeff Johnson and others, for our Anytime is a Good Time to Talk About Emergency Preparedness public service announcements. Those are all available on our Be Ready Utah YouTube channel, youtube.com/BeReadyUtah, right where you are right now. After this webinar is over, bookmark our YouTube channel and you'll find all kinds of videos there. Videos from our previous 2 Be Ready Utah webinars are available on the YouTube channel. We've had lots of great presenters, lots of great topics for emergency preparedness. They are all available on our Be Ready Utah YouTube channel.